All right. So with that, let's briefly talk about what an API token is, and then we'll go down to the main content for this week. So historically, or I don't know, at this point in time, overwhelmingly, most websites and the server where all of their data lives use an HTTP REST architecture in order to communicate back and forth. We've seen that already with our dummy JSON that we started using 2 weeks ago. If I read the docs here, this is a REST API that is exposing certain routes that I can send a request to of a particular method. And when I send that request, the server hears that I sent a request for a particular method at a particular URL. It checks, do I have any code that's defined in order to handle that particular request? And if there is, it'll do the thing that it's supposed to do that the designer of the API implemented, whoever created our server, and then it's going to give me data back. But there are some routes where it really is not important that only specific people can access them, or that I've logged into your service before I send a request there. In this case, this dummy JSON, all it's doing is just serving us a bunch of shopping products. It doesn't really matter if we're logged in anywhere or not. We can still view products, no problem. And so there's not any authentication on these routes that we've been using. But there are other routes that are more important that we gate those behind some sort of authentication. So maybe I want to create a new product in your API. I would want to make sure that I am verifying that the person who's sending that request is logged into my system, has an account, and I know who is creating that item. Maybe it has some relation to the data internally. But we really don't want any random person in the world, potentially nefarious, to be able to send requests that either impersonate someone else or send requests at a super high volume with no accountability, or just like in other ways break the system that we currently have in place. In general, we should only let people send requests if we know that they are logged in and they're doing things the way they're supposed to. So I think one of the more common ways of authenticating a user, I'm sure there are plenty, but this is the one that I've seen the most in the couple years that I've been developing, is by using JSON web tokens, or just tokens in general. But a token is just like a string of, I don't know, like 15, 20 characters, could be any length, could be any kind of characters. And it basically just encodes a set of more important data. Uh, so this is a specification for how we can encode data into a particular string. I could encode data basically however I want. But we basically take like an object with a bunch of different keys and values, and we turn it into this really long and complicated string that if someone's looking at this token, they're going to have no idea what that actually is doing. And this token is how the server knows that you are the person sending the request, because this token in the server is associated with your user. If you send this token, it can only reference your user in the server, and whatever route you're sending a request to, it's going to associate that with you. Maybe it means that you're creating a product under your name, so on and so forth. If you do not send a token, the server is going to reject your request because you haven't authenticated and you could be someone malicious. If they try and read your token and they can't decode it into an object like this, and or they decode it and the object has data that doesn't make any sense, then they are going to reject it because you passed in a fake token that's invalid. Or if you try and pass in a token that has expired, we don't generally want, oh, excuse me. We generally don't want these tokens to stick around forever and ever because if I were to log in on one laptop and then do my business and then leave and never log on to that laptop again, the next time someone else logs on for me or someone gets onto my computer, they could very easily just start sending requests if that token is still valid. So typically these will last for a sort of short amount of time before the server expires them. Maybe that would be part of the data that's encoded in this token. Maybe it has like a time at which it expires. And if I send a request and the time inside the token is before, then that means my token has already expired and the server is going to reject it. That token is no longer valid. I have to get another token. So how do you get that token? You get that token by logging in. Typically what you do is you'll send your credentials to the server. It'll check your credentials, make sure everything works. It'll create a token for you and it'll send you that token. And you store that token on your um, on your browser and you use it as long as it's valid. When it's no longer valid, then we're going to get rid of it. I don't know why I'm on this site. I accidentally misclicked it. But you'll notice on some sites, if you go into your storage and into your local storage, you may have some items down here that represent certain tokens. Um, maybe I'll have one. I don't know what to do that's not super sensitive. Um, there's nothing super helpful in here, but generally your token will be stored in local storage on your browser and you can load it up whenever you need. So the questions that I got last week for the first thing are, if we need that API token, uh, is it a problem to store on the user's browser? And the answer is generally no. No one else should have access to my browser. If someone can get into my computer and start digging around in my file system and try and find that token somewhere, well, then I have other problems because someone has already, hacked onto my computer. So storing a token locally on your front end for only that user is really not a problem. That's exactly what it's intended for. And you can use it as long as it's valid, and then you get rid of it and you get another one, so on and so forth. And I think the other question, um, is there anything that we should keep in mind? Generally, sending API tokens is a pretty well-known problem. So if we have like a fetch function somewhere, um, let's make this a JavaScript file just really quick. All right, so if I have a fetch function and I'm sending it to some url.com and I give it a bunch of options and then I have my then and my catch and my finally, blah, blah, blah. We know how to fetch. We've done this before. Maybe I have a post request and I have some body, JSON.stringify, some object. What I will typically do in order to pass this is add a header. So headers, I think we mentioned this very briefly, are just sort of like annotations on your request that indicate that something is the server should know something about your request. And this will typically be, I think, an object. And we pass it an authorization header, which says, how am I trying to authorize to your server? You can, some servers may use basic authorization, which is where you just put in your username and your password in the header. That is certainly a thing that people can do, but we generally try and avoid that because now your password is showing. And so instead we do token authorization. So you may see this occasionally, or this week or last week with the bearer, and then the name or the really long token here, blah, 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 blah. All right. Um, Only other thing I want to mention here really quick about tokens, before we talk about something totally unrelated, is how your tokens are encoded like this. So your server is the one that's issuing tokens, which means that it has some data that it wants to send to you, and it wants to do that in a like a encoded way where someone who's listening and is not going to immediately know what data is inside of there and be able to mess that up. No one should be able to generate their own tokens except the server. So what typically happens here is there is a key that is stored somewhere on your server. Maybe it's in a .env file. No, I don't want you to do that. .env dot server private key. And this is just some other string, which is just used as like a means of encoding something with a really complicated algorithm. And then your server will take your data, username, Smith, ID of one, expiration, date, um, and it'll take this data, and this is pseudocode. This is not real code since I haven't used Express in a while. But it will data.encode and use that server private key. And only the server knows about this key. No one should ever receive this key. It should live exclusively on the server, and no one should ever be able to access it, so that no one is able to pull apart the data inside of that token. Only the server should be able to undo that token and get the data back so that it can validate that you are, in fact, the person that you're saying you are. All right. This is a bunch of just like high level stuff about tokens. Hopefully, maybe something here is useful. There's lots and lots of details that I am not an expert enough on cryptography to give you really good explanations for. But it's a pretty interesting process and something that you use very, very often. This is a super, super common strategy for authenticating with an API. Most of the time, the APIs that you use are going to require you to send a token with almost every single request, with the exception being the login request so that you can get a new token. Questions here? All right. Hearing no questions again. Oh, great. All right. In that case, we're going to jump back into our application. So I'm just going to double check and send you guys the link. Feel free to clone if you already have it locally. Git pull on your master branch to get the changes from last week. And if you just want to follow along, that's also fine. So I have my master branch. I'm going to git pull, and we'll open this in VS Code. And we'll do a quick recap of where we are. All right. So we have this application. It works. It pulls, I think, 20 products at a time from our API, gives us all of these different explanations. And we can add some to our cart. We have a little toast down here, which is super cool. And we have our cart down here, which we can manage, and we have other toast items. And we can also filter and search stuff here if we really want to. Sweet. All right. So this is pretty cool. But if we were to go on to something like Amazon, oop, I guess we're not doing that. Any other shopping application, um, which I cannot think of right now, then we're going to need some extra pages in order to do some cool stuff. So I probably don't want to just get thrown immediately into the search page. Maybe I am just coming to your site and I want to like edit my account details, or I'm coming to your site and I want to go look at my previous purchases, um, any of those things, and I don't really need to search. So why would I come here by default? So maybe we have like a home page or a landing page where the user goes by default and can click some buttons to figure out which page they want to go to. We'll make a little bit of that today. We're not going to go crazy on the CSS. I'll write some CSS between this week and next week and make it look pretty, but we'll just get the functionality in place today. And separately, this is really cool, but I would like someone to be able to go to a page where they can uh, get more details on a product. Ooh, I think someone's unmuted. Remute you if that's okay. So I should be able to click on this listing and go to a page where I have more information. Maybe I have like reviews for the product and comments on the product and stuff like that. We're not going to do that today, but we'll at least create the separate page where we can show just this particular item at a time. And then, we can put some other stuff in there in future weeks if it makes sense. So that's our goal for today. We want to set up our React router so that we can create different pages for our application. And then B, we want to set up some buttons and some bells and whistles so that we can move between the pages freely. All right. So with that said, we're going to jump into things. One thing to note before we get started is that we are using React Router. React Router is a very large library and it has a lot of major versions. And between major versions, it has a tendency to completely change the way that you can do things and sort of break. So typically when you're using a library, we have something called a major version, which if I go into my package.json, I look at this React one. This has a major version of version 18. A major version is usually like if I am making changes that will completely break the code of users of my library, then I upgrade a major version. And it's expected if I upgrade to a different major version, it is very likely that your project will no longer compile because we've changed some of the functions that you can use. And so those functions may no longer be valid. Maybe we rename some stuff like that. So if React wanted to introduce a crazy new feature, they would bring it up to version 19 rather than incrementing one of these other versions. This minor version is less, important, but probably still has some good improvements. And then this patch version here is usually for like if I have something super small that is important that a user should have, but has like basically no impact of breaking something. It's really usually just like a fix or a patch of something that doesn't quite work. So maybe you submit your bug fixes as additional patches and then you increment minor numbers when you just release some interesting new features, things like that. So React Router has a bunch of different major versions. Recently, they released major version 7, which is a good amount different than version 6. I don't know exactly what the differences are, but version 6 is going to be different. You may find code online for versions 6 or even earlier versions. Typically, when you find Stack Overflow for React Router, if you go into any of the questions that involve routing, you're going to see a bunch of stuff that doesn't really look like what you have, and that's okay. So just be aware as you're going through your assignment, like pick a version of React Router and try and stick to it, and be aware that documentation online about routing may be using a different major version and look pretty different than what you have, and that's okay. Um, the recommendation from Roy, the CIL, is to try and use v7. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to npm install React Router. Not going to run. We're going to npm I React Router, and it will install version 7 for us automatically. If you're having problems with this, then feel free to specifically install version 6, which you can definitely Google how to do that if you're unsure. But try and stick with version 7. I think it will look very similar to version 6, and hopefully there won't be too many issues, but something to be aware of. All right. And then the other piece of documentation in here that was really confusing when I was looking at it is that they advertise using React Router in two different ways. So number one is a library where we just import it. We say, create these routes in my application, and that's all we're using it for. All we want it to do is control what elements are on the page when I go to a particular route. Sorry, let me do not disturb my phone so it doesn't keep buzzing out. So my application right now, I am at the default route. I can go to a different route like /foo, or I can go to /error, which none of those do anything right now because anything is not running. If we do this again, we go to /foo. You're going to notice that right now it's the exact same page because we haven't set up routing to say what shows when I go to /foo and what shows when I go to just my default route here. So we're going to do that in just a second. But I also just want to clarify, I'm doing a lot of talking this week and I apologize. We're going to do some coding in a second. That React is what's called a single page application, in that when I go to your website, I download JavaScript, and that JavaScript controls what shows on my website. I don't ever physically render a different HTML page. Not every website is like that. Not every framework is like that, but that's how React works. It's all JavaScript. There is exactly one HTML file, which is this index.html up in, nope, it's not in public. It's down here in your root level. But like this gets loaded, it loads this JavaScript, and this JavaScript is what controls your application, puts elements in and out. This is all the React stuff. There are other architectures where when I go to /foo, it sends a request to a server somewhere that says, give me the page for /foo. And those are different pages that can do different things. But that is not how React works. And so React Router as a library, it's not physically taking you to a different page. All it's doing is controlling what is the element that is showing up when I go to this route in my URL. It's still the same website. It's the same index.html. We're just showing a different JavaScript element in here. That is what it means by use as a library. And this is how we use it with just plain old React. There are way more complicated things that React Router can do. A lot of buzzwords here. They're not really important right now. But these are like high-tech web development features that even I don't really have a whole lot of practice with. So I can't totally explain these to you. But if I were using like usually a more complicated framework, something like Next.js, which you may have heard of before, that's something that doesn't really do single page applications. And so you might use React Router in that case, or other routing solutions that are a little more complicated and have lots of different features. And I think some of those features we can use in base React. I don't really know how this works. For all intents and purposes, we're just going to ignore this section for now. and we're just going to use it as a library, and we're going to click this getting started link for using React Router as a library. All right, so we have our application, we have React Router. Let's actually make some routes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my app.jsx, which is my top level component, and we are going to create a browser router component, which you'll notice imports from React Router. A browser router is a type of router that is designed for your web browser. There are other kinds of routers that do different things. There are some routers for React Native, where you're running things sometimes on the browser, but most of the time on a phone. And there's a different kind of router that's exposed for that. But for our purposes, we're always going to use a browser router here. And there's just some boilerplate that we're basically always going to use with React Router. We're going to declare a routes element, which says inside of here are all of the different routes that my page recognizes. And I'm going to render the element corresponding to the route that fits where they currently are. So I can create lots of different route elements in here if I want to, and we're going to. But we need to specify for each one what is the path that this route represents. So we'll create just our home path for a second here. And then we need to specify what is the element that is going to show the JSX component at that route. We don't really have one yet. Let's go create a homepage component maybe. So if I go into my components tab, we'll create a new folder for homepage. Create homepage.jsx. And we'll make it really quick. That doesn't really do anything super exciting. We'll make sure to export it. And let's just throw in some dummy content for now. All right, so we have a homepage. And at the base route, which is just a slash, we're going to do the homepage, which will auto import if I type it again. And then separately, we have a table of products. So maybe I create a route for slash products. And if I go to that route in my browser, then the elements that I'm going to show is these two things, the table and the cart display. We'll put these in a little fragment just because they have to have a parent element, like a top level parent element. I don't think that I can put them in here without a container of some sort. Yeah. All right. Oops. Cool. So we have two routes. We have our base route, which takes us to the homepage, and we have slash products, which takes us everywhere else. So now I have slash foo. If I inspect my page, it's going to tell me, React Router is telling me that this route does not exist. So we're going to have to, in a second, create a page for if someone went to a page that's invalid. We want to tell them this page doesn't exist. You'll notice this on like literally every website. If I were to go to with something that's not incriminating, like MLB.com, and I just type in some random stuff here. MLB.com/foo/bar. Yeah, it's going to give me this page that just catches all routes that don't exist. A 404 not found. 404 is the status code for the server doesn't know what you're trying to get. So we're going to have to create one of those in a second, but let's just make sure the rest of it works first. So if I go to my base route, I see to do homepage. And if I go to slash products, sweet, we get our full table, which is what we want here. We have nothing in our cart. We can add something just to prove that this still works. Sweet deal. All right, we have 2 pages. That was really easy. Now let's do some more interesting stuff. Not necessarily complicated, but just more interesting. Let's create that catch-all route. One thing that you're going to notice is that very rarely, if ever, are you going to actually put something in this route component. And so I can make these self-closing, which is a pretty common convention, I think. Not super important, but just, something that you can do. So let's create another route here where our path is just an asterisk. So anything that doesn't match everything else, and we're going to show the not found component, which doesn't exist yet. Let's go create it. Um, let's make this one look a tiny bit pretty. Make a div. The style will be width of 100 view width, which is to say take up the whole screen. Height, 100 view height, same thing. Display flex, justify content, center line items, line content, center. I think this will work. And then let's create like a header for page not found. See what this does. All right, so we have slash products, our base route, and then if I go to slash foo, sweet, 404 page not found. All right, the CSS didn't work perfectly. I was hoping that it would show up right in the middle here. It looks like it's very tall. I'm surprised that this H2 is so tall. You notice when I hover over it that it's taking the full width of the page, which is unexpected.
You could do padding top or margin top 100 px or something to drop it down.
Yeah, kind of hard codes it. I would love it if it just literally showed up in the center. I'm not sure quite why it's not working, but I also don't want to spend a lot of time looking into this. So I think that I'm just going to leave it for now. Um, looks good enough for me. The page works as expected. I can go to foo, I can go to bar, so on and so forth. And yes, I could put a manual margin at the top here, but then if I resize my page, then it's going to look weird. It might be like out of the screen or something like that. Oh, didn't mean to do that. All right, here we go. So we got our home page. It's nothing super exciting right now. Let's add some other stuff in here. Maybe we'll make this a div and we'll create an H1. Welcome to my shopping application. And then let's create a button down here and search products. So how do we make this button take us from our home page to slash products? Which right now it doesn't do anything. Oh, we got an extra semicolon in there somewhere. Oh, it's over here. Well, the answer is that React Router provides a hook for us to do this, which is really cool. That's not what I want. React Router, getting started library, and down here we have navigating. So we can force a user to change their page. So we have our nav link, and we can say when they click on this link, we're going to navigate them to a particular page. So that would look like, instead of this button, a nav link to slash products, search products. And if I go in here, this is just a link that I can click on. And we could style this link if we want to. This is an anchor tag, which has an href property. This href says go when this is clicked to a particular location. So I could style this nav link if I want to, or we're just going to use a button like we had it. And we're going to use this use navigate hook down here, which allows us to programmatically say go to a specific page. So use navigate returns a function that we can call, and we give it a property that says where are you going to navigate to. So we're going to navigate the user to slash dashboard when something happens. So what do we want to happen? Well, when the button is clicked, function that executes is we're going to navigate the user. So navigate is equal to use navigate. We are going to navigate to slash products. And so now, if I click search, it takes me in here and I can go back, click the button as much as I want. All right, it's taking us around the site. Friendly reminder, we are not actually going to a different page. All it's doing is telling React Router, update the URL in the browser and then check what should be at that URL or at that route and display the JavaScript element. So we're on the exact same page. Nothing is refreshed. We're just swapping out the JavaScript to say, instead of showing me that homepage element, show me this product table element. All right, this is pretty cool. Let's do some other stuff. So we have our product table. We want to show just one product at a time. So if I maybe click on this title should take me to a page that just shows a particular product. We can edit that pretty easily if we go into our product listing here and just find that H2, the product name. We can add some stuff in here to say when I click on this, I want to navigate. So we'll use that hook again. And we're going to navigate to, I don't know. I don't know where we're going to navigate yet. We don't have a page for that. We're going to do that in a second. So we'll leave this as to do for now. And if I click on any of these, it's going to take me to slash products slash to do, which is not exactly what we want. The difference here in putting a slash in front is this is an absolute path, which means when I click on this, it's going to take me to slash to do. Whereas if I don't start it with a slash, it's going to take me to whatever the route currently is, and then stick to do on the end of it. So it's taking me to slash product slash to do, which may come into play in a second. All right, really quick, we're just going to add a little bit more styling in here because right now this H2 does not look like it should be clickable at all. It's just like a piece of text. So a couple of styles that are pretty helpful to have are the pointer style. So pointer, or no, cursor pointer says when I hover over this element, what should the cursor look like? We can make it a pointer. We can make it a bunch of other different things like the crosshair. If I hover over it, now it's going to show me just that little plus.
You could
Crosshair is
do
what it's called.
hover text decoration underline.
We could do that too. Um, I think we'd have to do that from CSS. I don't know that I don't actually know how to do that from like just this object here. But yeah, we could do text decoration and say underline my text just to make it look extra clickable. So now it behaves exactly like it's a link where it has an underline and then I click on it and it does something like that. So this is a little more inviting. It lets us know that we can click on this. Maybe we could make this whole thing clickable as well. That would also be an option, but for now, I think this is fine. All right, so this takes us to slash product slash to do. What are we going to do about that? Well, we got to create a page that can show just one product at a time. And let's go do that really quick. We're going to create a folder here for product. Put it in components. So just product. Actually, maybe we can move this one in here, but that's going to break a bunch of imports and we're running out of time. So we'll just create a single product component. Right. And what is this going to be? Well, this is just going to show us a box. And in this box, we're going to have an H1, which is my product.name. And we'll have an H5 just arbitrarily, which is my product.description. And we'll have an image where the source is product.image. And I think that's okay for now. So how do we get this product? How do we tell this product what it's actually going to show? Maybe we could try and do something with props here where we create a product and we pass in the ID that it's supposed to be showing. But React Router actually has us covered here. So if we go back into our React Router documentation and we go into URL values, there's a concept of parameters for a URL. So there's two different kinds of parameters. If I have a URL, I'm going to zoom in really quick here. Actually, that did not help whatsoever. So let's say we're creating a route here for slash product. Our element is our product element. So there's such a thing as a URL parameter, which is to say it's an identifier of some kind that is built into the URL. And when we're writing code for the URL, we reference it using a semicolon. So this is slash product slash an ID, maybe a number or a string, however our server represents the ID of the product. And if I wanted to view the product on my site of a particular ID, well, I would go into my site localhost slash product slash the actual ID number. Maybe one, could be some really big number, could be some string. Maybe we're saying that a product has to have a unique name. In that case, we could just put the name in here, so on and so forth. But this parameter we can actually access from inside of our code in order to read what the actual current value of that parameter is on the page. So this is just for reading in our actual code itself, but when someone goes to this page, this will be a real value. And so they've created a hook for us, use params, which lets us take this parameter, which the name has to match up exactly with how you declare it in your path, excluding this semicolon, regular colon. And then we can actually use this data to do whatever we want. So this is saying they're going to like fetch some data from a backend API server, and they're using the city that the user wanted as the thing that we're going to fetch from the backend. And we're actually going to do something very similar to that here. We're going to go into our product, and we're going to say const ID is equal to use params, which gives us the ID of the product in the URL. And we can actually take this out for now. Let's comment this out. And just to prove that this works, let's show a paragraph element with just the ID in it. Um, so if I refresh my page, uh, I not fix. Oh, and close this route. So I'm in here. I'm in my shopping app. And then when I click on this, it's taking me to products to do, which I realize we got to fix. Let's replace this to do with the thing that we actually want to go to, which is slash products slash product.id. And so now when I click on this, it should take me to, this is product with ID 1, and this is product with ID 2, and so on and so forth. We got to fix our routing though. So we have different routes here for slash product slash ID, but it should be slash products. Great. And so now it's showing us the right page, which just has the ID of whatever product I have in here. And I can click on any of these and it'll show that it actually takes us to the right page. So what are we going to do with that ID? Well, we're going to take it and we're going to request the product from the server. We actually have some code to do this already in app. No, it's not an app.jsx. It's in our table. This get products function. Let's copy this whole thing and repurpose it. Get products. And what do we want to request? Well, our dummy JSON, we can request every product if we want to, which is what we have done in the past. So we get all products by just requesting slash products. Or we can get a single product in that same format, slash products slash the identifier. So let's do that. And we don't need a limit anymore since we're getting a very specific item. So we're just going to throw ID in there and we're going to fetch the product at that ID. We're going to get our JSON back and we got to fix this up. So in our response for getting lots of different products, we got an object that looked like this. This is an array. And then in here, we have a bunch of different product items. And so on and so forth. But this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for just getting a singular product. We don't really need a list. There's only ever going to be one thing in there. And so you'll see the output looks different. So we have products and then an array and then a bunch of objects. But if we get a single one, it's just the object with all the stuff in here. There's no array. So in our previous request, where we unload everything in the array, we don't need to do that anymore. We're just going to get data, and that data is our product itself. But we do still need to map it. This mapping takes the server's version of the data that has all these properties of different names, and we're just going to stick it into our own application. We're going to import pick random name, which is a function that we wrote in a previous week, I think. And how are we going to store this product? This is a React component. It needs to be able to re-render and still show me the same product. I don't want to fetch this all the time. I really just want to fetch it the first time I need to. So this is a pretty good candidate for a state variable. set it to null originally since there's nothing in here. All right, so we get the product and then we set our product to be this new object. And instead of mapping, we're just going to create an object directly from this. So we have our item, we pull all the properties out, we create our own object, and we stick it into product. Error is not defined. We didn't use our toast. I think I just closed it by accident. All right, so error is now defined. Error works. We got a call get product. So when do I want to call it? Well, the first time that I load up my page, which if you'll remember, we can do by using a use effect. So in this use effect, I'm going to call get product. And we're going to do this only when our page first gets loaded by using this empty dependency array. So you only do it once when the page first gets loaded. We're going to have our product in here. And this is going to crash my site. And the reason is because product starts as null. So when this first gets loaded, the state variable is going to be null. It's going to run this get product, but it takes a little while. It doesn't happen right away because it's asynchronous. And it's going to start trying to render this stuff, but null.name, you can't do that. So we're just going to really quickly stick in like a loading state, which I think you guys might do either in this assignment or in a previous assignment. But if our product is null, or another way you could write this is if product is falsy, then we're going to return something else instead. We're going to return a paragraph element that just says loading. So now if it's loading, it'll just say loading, which you get for a very brief second up there. And then once it's finished loading, it'll stick all of our stuff in here. Ooh. Trying to go really fast so we can hit the end by 8 o'clock. But that is basically everything that I wanted to cover. So we have our page, we have our /product/1. I'll make a couple of mentions here. Another way that you can represent these routes that would also work is by nesting routes. So let's say I want, these are both starting with /products. So they shouldn't be at the same level. They should be grouped together in /products. And we don't, there's no element for /products necessarily, but these two are subpaths of /products. What is this first one? Well, this is /products/nothing. And then this one is /products/ and then my identifier. This is going to work exactly the same. Oop, maybe not. Oops, I can't use an absolute route here. So I need to say that it's an empty path. This one will work. So /products, home, products, singular product. So these are all nested. The other thing you can do, this looks a little weird saying there's no path in here, is you can say this is my index route, which is functionally exactly the same. It's whatever the parent level is, but then nothing beyond that. So this is just another way you can represent the same routes rather than doing 3 right next to each other. Nesting is generally preferred. I think there's lots of benefits that come with it. So if you can nest routes, you should. But just something to be aware of. All right, it's 8 o'clock. I'm done talking. If you gotta go, make sure to fill out the sign-in form before you go. I'll repost the link for you guys. But otherwise, I'll stick around for a couple minutes for questions as normal. I know I went really fast today. I'm very sorry. But we had a lot to cover. Otherwise, I'll see you next Thursday. Have a good weekend and good Thursday night.